Okay, so the recording is going. Okay, so let's see. So okay, so 3 goals: cultural competence, catch up on those few videos that we didn't get to see that one time, and then just double checking for last minute assignments and making sure we're all clear on that. Okay, so let's go to, oh, and of course my doggy's out there barking. Hold on. Hagen, come here, come on, come here. Okay. All right, it's kind of like a child, right? Okay, so we'll go to share screen. And I pulled up this document. It should be. Okay, do you guys see the Word document? Okay, great. Okay, so this is a document that NIAC, the National Association for Educating Young Children, they worked with the California Department of Education. And I believe that this is on one of that last module where we talk about cultural competence. When we go through final assignments, we'll make sure that that's on there. I'm pretty sure it is. And so it's kind of it's 21 pages, but I want to just kind of go over with you kind of how this document's laid out and kind of talk about how it can be helpful to you. So I'm going to go right here to page 3, I believe. And it kind of talks, yeah, it'll be page 3 right here. Here we go. Okay, so it says that basically what this document is it's some checklists. And the checklists are built around 8 different concepts. And so the concepts are listed here on the bottom of page 3 and top of page 4. So concept number 1, children are nested in families. I kind of like that term, nested. I think that's pretty neat. Concept number 2, I identify shared goals among families and staff. And you know, to always be looking at, well, what are those shared goals? That sometimes there will be some differences. In fact, I always like say, be really careful, like when we say things like to kids, like, would you do that at home? Because sometimes, like, yeah, you know, like, you know, maybe feet up on the furniture or, you know, grabbing food in a way, you know, off the plate, or, you know, eating, you know, something with their hands instead of their fork, or, you know, something like that we think is a cultural norm, but maybe it's really not. And so we really need to be careful with that. So I love that concept number 2, look for shared goals among families and staff. So, you know, things like, you know, that we value safety, that we value a sense of belonging and those kinds of things. But even within that, there could be some differences, but that we all value that. Concept number 3, authentically incorporate cultural traditions and history into the classroom. So we want to be careful that we're doing that in an authentic way and in a respectful way. I'm sure you guys have heard about cultural appropriation, and that's kind of become kind of a word that people talk a lot about in schools. You know, it used to be that, you know, let's say that you were studying Native Americans, that then, you know, children would build like a little headband and have little feathers coming up, and you know, it's totally inappropriate. And first of all, it's communicating to children that that all tribal nations wore headbands with feathers, and that's not true. That number 2, it's cultural appropriation, to where it's students are taking on something to where that's not even really part of their culture. So in a way, it kind of mocks it. And sometimes those things are sometimes there's spiritual aspects related to those practices, and it can be really offensive to the culture that we're representing. And so when we talk about authentically incorporate cultural traditions, so it's to do so in a respectful way and such. So an example I can think of that is a family once at our school who had Hispanic heritage, they came in and made tortillas with us. And that was something that was a part of their family tradition. And they had special tools to do that and special recipes. And it was a wonderful way to share their culture. So we'll talk more about these when we look at the checklist. Concept number 4, acknowledge child development as a culturally driven ongoing process that should be supported across contexts in a child's life. So in other words, let's have school-home partnerships. Concept number 5, individuals and institution practices are embedded in culture. And so even just things like, look at me when I talk to you. In some cultures, it could be to where looking down at your feet is actually a way of showing respect. And yet a teacher might interpret as, you're not being respectful to me. You're not looking at me in the eyes. There could be certain things to where some teachers might think it's very affectionate to tap a child on the head, but yet there would be some cultures where that's actually like a very insulting thing to do. And so it's just understanding that maybe there are some practices, and to understand that that we have some cultural practices that may be different than our students' cultural practices. Ensure decisions and policies embrace home languages and dialects. So, understanding the languages that are spoken in your students' family's home and looking for ways that you can accommodate for that. Ensure policies and practices embrace and respect families' cultural values, attitudes, and beliefs towards learning. And, it can be something as subtle as, it's embarrassing to say I did this, but I started teaching in the late 80s. And I taught 1 year in New York, and then I taught 3 years in Idaho. And the little community that I taught at in Idaho was a farming community. And one of my students once wrote in his journal that he wanted to grow up and to be a farmer, and he was going to go to college and get a doctorate degree in agriculture, and then he was going to be a farmer. And I wrote in a comment, wow, you are going to be such an educated farmer. And that's very insulting, right? And it was also really showing some misunderstandings that I had about farmers, because in the community where I was teaching, it was basically, it was like at least 50% of the families were farmers. And they were big farms, and it was not even unusual for people to have master's and doctorate degrees in agriculture that were running these huge farms. And it's like running a big business, right? And what I say, wow, you're going to be one educated lawyer. I wouldn't say that, it's like an assumption, right? And so anyway, so a dad came in and set me right, and it was a good education. That same community, when I was in college, a really big slang term at that time was being like a stud. And so if somebody was really good at something, you'd go, man, you're a stud at that. And so I had been ingrained with that in college. And so here I am writing comments on my students' papers, when they did really good, what a stud and stuff like that. And so a farmer came in and said, do you know what a stud is? And basically a stud is a bull that gets the cows pregnant, right? And he goes, I really don't want you calling my son a stud. I was like, I didn't know that, So when we talk about cultural differences, we're not just talking about things like, oh, I have a family who's maybe from Vietnam, or I have a family, who speaks a different language, or, came from a different part of the world. We're talking even just things that are, part of cultures, to where even the culture in Linden is different than the culture in Bellingham. And so it's just being aware of where you're at and the families you're working with. And then of course, knowing there could even be some unique aspects within that. I can think of one other example. I can't remember if I shared this with you guys already, but I worked with a lot of families from the Lummi Tribal Nation when I taught at Alderwood Elementary in Bellingham. And one year I had one of the dads, he was a nurse, and he came in and talked about how important math was in his job and how he has to use math to like figure out like, you know, like certain medications and things like that, to like know how much to give at what time and that sort of a thing. And that if he calculated wrong, it could be a really big problem. So anyway, it was a great thing that he came in and presented. And afterwards, when the kids were out at recess, he like started crying, and he said, he goes, I've never been invited into one of my child's classrooms except to talk about being a member of the Lummi Tribal Nation. He says, which I love to talk about, but it was so nice to just like come in and talk about my job, and that I'm seen as more than just a member of the Lummi Tribal Nation. And I just happened to be a nurse who is male and who is part of Lummi Tribal Nation, which also was really cool, because when I said that we were having a guest speaker come in, and we would have different parents come in, it would always be a surprise. So and so I said, well, we're going to have a nurse come in, and I didn't really say anything else. And then when he walked in his scrubs, some of the kids go, you told us it was a nurse, it's a doctor. And it was like, oh my goodness, look at these gender stereotypes that students are making just because it's a man in scrubs. So there's, there's
where it says that.
I don't want to be on there.
So yeah, so cultural things are just amazing. Like just what can happen there. I'm going to make sure everybody's on mute there. There we go. Okay. So yeah, so you just want to be super, super careful with that. I'm going to go back to that. Okay. Let's see. And then equalize balances of power, counter stereotyping and bias through intentional teaching. And so, when you think about like equalized balances of power and things, it's like, even like when we do things where we say, okay, we're going to do a fundraiser at school, and whoever raises the most money, gets this special privilege or something like that. Well, there's going to be certain families where they have more access to people that can buy things and donate money and that sort of a thing. And so that's not really acknowledged. That's like kind of giving more power to certain families in your school, if that makes sense. And so, doing things where you say, okay, maybe it's like, if you're going to do something where you're going to have some sort of incentive, then maybe it's as a class, that different classes will be competing, because each class is going to have some families that are living in poverty and having some families that maybe have more money. And then we're not comparing child to child. But then we can still have some fun with kind of some competitiveness with the school fundraiser. And so that's kind of an example with that. But the cool thing is you don't have to think up all these things when you have the concept. If you scroll down further in the document, then it will have to where it has each one of them. And so here's the checklist for concept number 1. Remember that first one was children are nested in families. So then they have just a whole little checklist of things where you could kind of self-reflect at your own center. And it could, or something that like you do as a staff or something you do individually. So the first thing that it always has review and discuss concept number 1. So it's always going to be like, the first thing you do is you just kind of talk about like, what does that mean? Children are nested in families. But then it'll have things down like, know the primary caregivers for the children in your program, and do not assume that they're mothers and fathers. And so just because, there's a woman that picks up a child each day, that might be an aunt, that might be, it might be a grandparent who's raising that child or helping to care for that child. It could be parents, maybe like someone they're having a relationship with, the boyfriend, girlfriend kind of a thing. There could just be all kinds of things. So we just don't automatically make that assumption. Encourage two-way communication with families. So we talked about that last week. It's not just you throwing information out, but getting that two-way communication going. Ensure that families have opportunities to give input to programs. We talked about that last time. We talked about do a survey and we gave some tips with that. Coordinate with classroom teachers to provide families with information and resources about topics the children are investigating in the program. And so providing information. I remember when my son was in preschool, his preschool teacher emailed all the parents and said, hey, just a heads up, this weekend is going to be one of the lowest tides of the year. And so you may want to go to a beach this weekend during these hours, and there's going to be great tide pools and such. And so I just really appreciated that. And then, you know, she talked about how they've been learning about the ocean and beaches at school, but it was really neat to get that little tip. And then it tied into what he was learning in school. So I'm not going to go through each and every one of these, but you can see to where there's kind of just like a nice little checklist to where then you can kind of go, okay, how am I doing with that first concept? Children are nested in families. Okay, so concept number 2, identify shared goals among families and staff. So it's always going to have that first one to where you just kind of talk about what does that mean? And then it'll have some examples. So like communicate to staff and families that the goal of the program is to develop a partnership in which each party can learn from each other. So like, is that something that you're saying all the time? Like every time you do a letter, thank you for partnering, you know, when you're sharing a concern, are you saying things like, I'm just so glad that we can partner? Is that, you know, it's, you know, intentionally using those words. So they're hearing that over and over again. So it's just so clear that that's what you're about. Requiring teachers to identify families' short and long-term goals for their children and to align them with classroom objectives and developmentally appropriate practice. So, you know, asking families, you know, what are some goals that you have for your child, you know? So you're starting, you know, preschool, they're starting kindergarten, you know, to ask what are some goals that you have? Because maybe their goals are a little bit different, but there's ways that you can incorporate those in. Maybe their goal is that they speak confidently in front of others, and you're like, oh yeah, that's something that I guess I never really thought about that, but that is a goal I have. So gosh, when I do show and tell, that could be kind of one of our goals. And so there can be things to where hearing what a family's goals can really help inform you. Sometimes family goals will be things to where it's very traditional. It'll be things like, well, I want them to listen to the teacher. And of course, you know, that's lovely. But then we can also just talk about how there's so many other social skills and things that we want children to learn as well. And so, but that also tells you if that's what a family's number one goal is, that also tells you that if ever you're going to share some bad news with that family, that's going to hit really close to home, because like that's their number one goal for their child, is to be respectful and to listen to the adults around them. And so if you share with them one day about, you know, a struggle that their child had that day, a challenge they had where they weren't listening, there'd be some families that are like, oh, okay, yeah, we'll talk about that. But that family, they're going to probably, maybe they're even going to be a little bit harsh with that, right? And so it's kind of, it's helpful to know that like that's their number one priority. So of course that's wonderful when that is a priority, but you can see to where maybe sometimes that could be to where it can be a detriment as well if it becomes a little bit too black and white. Let's see. So you can kind of look through all those different kinds of examples there. So then we go to concept number 3, authentically incorporate cultural traditions and history in the program. So the third one down says, invite family members to share information about their cultural backgrounds. And so sometimes that means sharing a particular food. Sometimes it means sharing a particular holiday. Sometimes it means maybe some sort of a special art project or a special PE game or a special book, a special song. And so it's kind of neat to think about ways to do that. I was in a first grade classroom a few years ago at Birchwood Elementary, and the teacher, she talked about winter holidays and 3 main characteristics that all of them have, that they all incorporate some kind of something to do with light and something to do with music and dancing or songs, and something to do with food. And so then children would come in and they would share, but then they would talk about it in those 3 categories. And so what does your family celebrate, and how does that connect with light? How does it connect with music? How does it connect with food? And I think those were the 3. I'm kind of doing that from memory, but it was kind of neat how she kind of like broke that into that, so then they could kind of look at similarities and differences. And then also it meant that they weren't going to necessarily get into some of the other nitty gritty parts of maybe beliefs and that kind of a thing, but they could look at just those things that are the commonalities. And I thought that that was a pretty neat way to do that. Let's see. Highlight the presence of all families and children in the program. Example strategies include hanging pictures on the walls of children and families, or highlighting their presence in program-wide activities. And so, yeah, having pictures of families on the wall is so important. I was in a program recently where there was all the pictures on down nice and low where children could see them, but there was one that had the child's name, but there was no picture there. And that was because the child hadn't brought the picture in yet. Well, got people in the waiting room here. Dre's having some problems here. So, you know, I asked, well, how long, you know, I mean, has the student been here the whole time? And let's see where I've lost you guys. I've lost you guys. Okay, I'm going to mute. Okay, sorry. Okay, so what was I saying? Oh, okay, so that student's picture wasn't in the was not in on the wall, and found out that student wasn't a new student. That student had been there since the beginning of the year, and they've given many reminders to the family. I said, well, then just snap a picture when he gets dropped off, you know, him. And even if it's not the whole family, then it's, you know, there's something up there. Or find out, you know, maybe his parents have a Facebook page where you might even be able to sneak a little picture and you could get their approval, but you could say, hey, I printed this picture out. You know, there might be some sort of a reason to why that's not there, or at least at the minimum, if the family for some reason doesn't want that posted on the wall, then at least take it down so it doesn't, like, it's not so blatant that his family isn't there. But like when it's his name with an empty piece of paper, it just like stands out. And here's all these families, and his family isn't represented. So, but those are things like, you know, that can just be, as a teacher, you can kind of go like, oh yeah, they haven't gotten that to me yet. But that's like a huge thing for a kid to see their family represented as well. And then to look at what might be some barriers that might be there to where we can take those barriers down. Maybe printing a picture just isn't a possibility for that family. Maybe they struggle with some technology things, or maybe with costs. Maybe there's some language issues to where they're not really clear in understanding what it is you're asking. But yeah, just making sure that we've really got families represented. Let's see. Let's take a look at the next one. Number 4, acknowledge child development as a culturally driven ongoing process. It should be supported across contexts in a child's life. So it says, invite families to define their ethnicity or culture. Do not assume based upon appearances. And that needs to be done very tactfully. We don't say things like, well, where are you from? if, you know, maybe like when children, or when you do a little survey asking about their child, you could say, you know, is there something you want to share about your family's ethnicity or culture? And then, you know, they could share it if they want to. And it also, that number 3, I love, equip classrooms with appropriate instructional resources such as books and toys that expose children to role models from their own and other cultural backgrounds. And so it's really like looking around your classroom and making sure, like, you know, do the books, do the posters, do, you know, is there a representation of all different kinds of children and all different kinds of families? And is it done in a way to where it's not stereotypical? I'm going to do a screen. I'm going to stop sharing this, and I'm going to go just to Google. Okay, are you guys seeing Google right now? Yes, okay. So I want to do kids around the world bulletin board border, just because I'm going to guess that there's going to be some stereotypical ones here. So for example, you can see here on the Amazon page, you can see to where there's this little globe here with kids around the world. And it's just very stereotypical of like, they're wearing like traditional garb and such, like, so it's making it look like somebody from Central or South America, like that, you know, they're always wearing a sombrero, you know. There's just things to where this really isn't like that. That's traditional garb. So here there is like probably like traditional from like Germany. Well, you know, children in Germany aren't dressed like that, you know, maybe when they're maybe at a special event where they're celebrating their heritage or something. But so you want to make sure that when we're doing things, we're not doing it in a stereotypical kind of a way. A really cool example. Oh gosh, I gotta remember. I gotta remember what that's called. I just looked it up recently. I was telling somebody about it in one of my classes. Now all of a sudden I just can't. Oh, here it is right here. It's called Karate Hour. Okay, so let me find that. So it's a really cool book called Karate Hour, and I'm going to actually look for video so that I can kind of show you just some of the pages. There's like some read alouds there to where what I love about this book is it shows like what happens in a karate class. And I just saw this just recently, so let me look and see who the author is. Of course, I'm not using Google, so it's probably part of the problem here. Let's see, who is the author on that? Carol Nevius. Boy, this is that computer I borrowed, so it's like not liking their search engine here. Okay. Oh, they've got a baseball hour too. That one's new to me. Here it is. Okay, so
check out this verbo. Oh man. My phone, they're cousins.
Doesn't matter. I don't want you guys to hear it, so it's more just looking at the pictures. Okay, boy, I am getting. Okay. So the pictures are just beautiful. Okay, so here's like, so look at that picture there. I love this. So are you guys seeing like, so, oh, here there's like a child in a walker. Okay, are you guys able to see that? Okay, and then we have children of different colors and we can see different genders represented here. Look at this picture here. They're showing like how they stretch, and look at how there's different abilities. Like one child isn't able to stretch all the way down to the floor, but it's showing like everyone's accepted here. I just love this. It's very, very subtle. And so there's a picture of like a little boy who's a little bit overweight somewhere in here. I'm not sure where that one's at. I feel like it's more towards the front, but I just love it so much to where it's like just showing all different kinds of children, all different kinds of abilities, showing just all different kinds of things to where, and it never is discussed in the text. It's very subtle, but it's, oh, there, right there. So there's like, you know, people of children with different body sizes and such. And so I just love it because it's like, it's a book to where, you know, children could just be looking at it and it's just communicating something. And so, you know, there may be another book about karate that just maybe shows only maybe mostly boys in the class and maybe doesn't have a lot of ethnic diversity and such. And so it's kind of just paying attention to your books and just kind of saying like, you know, gosh, you know, and would, you know, and it's not, you may say, oh, well, kids in my program, we don't have a lot of diversity. Like when I taught in Idaho, we didn't have any students of color in our school. And, but that meant that it was even more important that I had all different children represented in my classroom. And so we're not just representing just the children who are in our classroom, but also maybe those who aren't. And then maybe that's going to break down some stereotypes as well. So, so I really love to kind of think about that as well. Okay, let's go back to that document. Do we see the Word document again now? Okay, great. Okay. Then we've got concept number 5, individuals and institutions. And so encourage staff, families, and children to learn about each other's racial, linguistic, and cultural backgrounds by having a variety of year-round program-wide activities. So there can just be lots of different things to where we can be celebrating and honoring each other's cultures. And sometimes it's things to where, like right now, we just did in the 7th and 8th grade class that I teach, students brought in collections because we've been talking about why do people collect things and how do they organize it and what are the pros, what are the cons, and all this kind of stuff. And so different people were bringing in different collections, and some of them were very culturally connected to their families and such, to where, you know, we had a family who brought in the little nesting dolls that were from Russia, and their family had immigrated from Russia. And so talking about how that's a very common thing found in Russian households, and it's often a thing that's passed down from many generations. And here she has this whole collection of nesting dolls, and they're all just so beautiful. Somebody else brought in a collection of little wooden shoes, and you know, their family had some Dutch heritage, and so being able to talk about that. And so, but it was just bringing collections. So other kids brought in rocks or coins or you know, different collections they had, and that really don't really have a cultural representation, but just because we just brought in collections, then it did. And I want to show you guys a video here too, to where it's something of a show and tell, to where it kind of ends up being that way as well. Then we have ensure policies and practices embrace and respect families' cultural values and attitudes, equalize balances of power, as we had talked about. So this document is on the site to where it's just a nice little checklist. So that if you're kind of going like, well, I don't know, what does it mean to be cultural competent? So when you're doing your final work notes, you could use this document if you wanted to. You could also use the textbook that we have. There is not a section in that textbook. Like, remember how there was a section that was geared around nurturing relationships, and there was a section that was around families, and there was a section around safety and nutrition. So the last 3 work notes we've done, you've been able to just define that section in your textbook. There's not a section that's just about cultural competence, because Washington State wanted it to say that's not a separate thing. That's something that is embedded into everything you do. So if you go into that document and then you just go into a searching for a particular word, you can just search for the word culture or search for the word cultural, and it will come up throughout the document. And then you could just use that in your work notes. So you could use this document, or you could do a search for a particular word. And I think I model that in the video that is connected to cultural number 4. So if you're kind of wondering, how do I search for a particular word in that document, it shows you in there. So any questions about cultural competence, cultural responsiveness? Okay.
I really,
Yes.
really quick, I'm sorry. Did we have to do work notes this week? I thought it was a discussion board week.
So this week is a discussion board, but you will
Okay.
have, I think it's next
For
week when your work
next week.
notes.
Okay,
Yeah.
got you.
Yeah, sorry if I said this week, sorry. Yeah, so, but it's your last cultural notes assignment.
Okay.
Is
Okay,
related to cultural responsiveness, yeah. So this week you're kind of getting warmed up to it because that's what we're talking about in the discussion board. Okay, let's take a quick look and we'll actually go into take a quick look at our oh, my goodness, maybe a heart attack there. Okay. Okay, let's see. So we are at right here. So here's week number 9. Okay, so what we just went over tonight was the cultural competence checklist. So that is on here. And then there's also an article just about teaching young children to understand and accept differences. And then there's a short little video about start seeing diversity. You know, sometimes people will say things like, you know, I just love all my children. I don't even look at their color. I don't even think about their color. Well, I think what you're trying to say is that that doesn't influence how much you love them, right? And so that's awesome. But to say you don't see their color means that there's a part of them that you don't see. And so it's wonderful to actually see someone's color and to just, you know, to appreciate their brown skin, to appreciate their light skin, to appreciate the color of their eyes, to appreciate the way that you know, just how each one of them is unique. That we don't want to say things like, oh, I think we've got some people coming in early here for another class. Okay, I think I just admitted somebody else for another class that I'm doing right after this one. So if I've let you in, you're just catching the end of another class. Okay, so I saw people waiting and I was like, oh, I gotta let them in. So let's see. And then, so then this week, then you've got the anti-bias education discussion board. again, if I just let you in and you're not, and you're waiting for the guest speaker, that will be happening soon. I'm just finishing up another class. Okay, and let's see. And then the last one is right here for week number 10. And so the last things for the do are to make sure that you do your self-evaluation, to check to make sure your supervisor does that. And then here's the task number 18, which is the cultural responsiveness. And then also make sure you get all of your hours turned in. So remember that that's the goal, is the end of next week, but really technically you have till the week after, you have till the 25th, but you're going to try to get things done by the end of next week. So then I can kind of remind you that week after for anybody who is still waiting to finish up any of those things. And especially because I know sometimes, like when you're trying to get something from your supervisor, that you need that extra time. So, so let's see. Do we have time to watch that video? Do you guys see where it says teaching channel? Yes, good. Okay. I don't know if I have it where you guys can hear the sound though. I better double check that. I'm going to go to stop share. I'm going to go to share screen. Yeah, it was not on share sound. Okay, then I'll go to here. Okay, and then we'll go to okay, so this is a show and tell in a kindergarten, and so I won't show the whole thing, but it's actually not even that long, but I want to cut it even shorter. But let's take a quick look. Hear the volume?
For show and tell, the kids bring in an antique for what we call the Antiques Roadshow, which is anything that was made before they were born. In the past, students have brought in things like a VHS tape. They brought in a lighter and an ashtray. They brought in a rotary phone. And it's a little scary to see the things that are a part of my life suddenly show up as antiques. All right, everybody who has sharing today, go get it. Show and tell or sharing is one of the most difficult parts of kindergarten. It's essential because children want to share about their lives at school. But it can be very boring. It can also be very exclusive. Children can bring in expensive things that they have that other children don't have. And so what we've done over the year is we've kept shifting around. We start with, you can bring anything you want. Then when we do the alphabet, it has to tie into the letter of the day. So on B Day, you can bring a ball. Nice loud voice. At this point in the year, we're at Antiques Roadshow. So they have to bring in some object that is older than them.
Name, Julia. What is your object? Magic 8 Ball. How old is your object? 61.
The worksheet for the Antiques Roadshow says, this is my name, this is the name of my object, this is the age of my object, and what does this object teach us about the past?
What does this object teach us about the past? That toys tell the future.
Toys tell the future. Let's see your Magic 8 Ball.
You can ask a yes or no question, and I'll give you an answer.
All right. Raise your hand if you've seen that before, the Magic 8 Ball. Okay. So it's 61 years old? Interesting. All right. And so the sharing at this point is them either reading it or memorizing it on their own,
McKenna.
and then choosing a boy and a girl to make comments.
That's your comment.
Kids are doing a lot of writing on their own. A lot of kids are doing reading on their own.
Name, Enzo. What is your object? Fossil. How old is your object? Thousands of years. What does your object teaches us about past? Dinosaurs were alive in the past.
Our year-long theme was how things change, that history exists, that things happened before you were alive, that kind of made the world the way it is now. And so it's this little piece that I want them to get, that things were different a long time ago.
Zoe Z. Is that a real, fossil?
Do you think it's real, or do you think someone made it in a factory?
I think it's real.
He thinks it's real. Okay. All right, thank you, Enzo.
Name Charlie. Name necklace. This is 68 years old.
One of the kids brought in a necklace, which was made of wood, it was beads, but what made it remarkable was that he also brought in a picture of his grandmother wearing those beads, probably sometime in the 1940s or 30s. There's a picture of her a long, long time ago. How can you tell this picture is an old picture? How can you tell it's an old picture, Sam?
Because it's black and white on it.
Yeah, it's not in color. And that's the same necklace in the picture is right there. That's pretty cool. But it's, again, the idea of what came before you.
Okay, so notice how this show and tell project, that is something that might bring up some cultural kinds of things and might bring in some things where children get to share things really personal about their family and such, like this little boy did. But it also might just be the magic 8-ball, and that's okay too. But those kinds of things kind of invite those opportunities to where those kind of things can be shared. So it doesn't have to be where you tell families this week we're going to share where everybody shared something about their heritage or something about their culture. It doesn't have to feel artificial in that way, but you're just setting up opportunities to where it just might happen naturally. And that's lovely. And so anyway, I just love this idea for show and tell, because I think it just kind of takes show and tell to a whole different level. And I thought it was really clever. And I think families would have fun with it too. The whole idea of Antiques Roadshow. And so, and I love what he also talked about, how show and tell can be very exclusive and such. Okay, I've got another class right after this, and people are already trying to get in. We have a guest speaker. You guys are more than welcome to stick around if you want to. We've got a guest teacher who's a middle school math teacher coming from my Education 202 class. And it's starting at 7. So it's at this place. So if you want to stick around, you can. But are there any questions to help you guys finish out the quarter? You might need to speak up because I might not see you. Okay, normally we do a thing at the end where you guys each get to share something. So I feel really bad tonight that we didn't get to really have dialogue at the end. But I'm hoping tonight was helpful to you, and it was a great quarter getting to work with you. Those of you that I'll be visiting your site soon or having Zoom meetings, I'll be looking forward to that. But anyway, so we'll call that good. So, all right, talk to you later.
Thank you.
Yes, thanks.
Thanks. Good night.
Good night. Hi there. I started letting some of you in early when I was finishing up with that other class. I hope that didn't confuse you too much.
Hello.
Hello.
So I was taking Zoom class in this morning, and somehow my Zoom is sometimes just knocking me off from the meeting. I don't know what's wrong, but like if that happened, can I just come back?
Yes,
Or do
you
you
bet,
want me?
you
Yeah,
bet.
okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll be looking for you.
Yeah, that might
I do,
happen. Like,
yeah, I do know that I had something happen last night when I was doing a Zoom to where all of a
yeah,
sudden at 40 minutes it was going to shut me down. The 40-minute
yeah.
free thing they're not doing anymore, or the staying longer than 40 minutes. So that
I
might,
don't,
wonder
because
if
I
that's what
wasn't
it is.
host. I was just attending as a
Yeah, so
student.
then I
So
don't
I
know.
don't know what happened. But like when I was attending class this morning on Zoom, that happens. And the teacher was pretty suspicious because I was just going like in and out, in and out. So just to make sure that something is wrong with my Zoom app. So if that happens, I might just change it to my iPad.
Yes,
Yeah, I
okay.
would just let you know with the chat if that happens.
Sounds good. Thanks for giving me
Thank
a
you.
heads up on that.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Good evening, Anthony.
Hey Rock, how you doing?
Hi. So good to see you. We've got still some more people joining, so we'll wait a few more minutes.
No worries. I always like to be a little bit early.
That's a good practice.
I mean, in practice, I like to be.
Yes,
Not
yes.
always. Yeah.
It's a good goal. There we
Mhm.
go.
I have one more thing to ask. So
Yes.
I wanted to attend yesterday's Zoom meeting, but since I checked my message after the Zoom meeting finished, but I'm willing to transfer to special ed. So if you have a recording, I want to watch it. Is it possible?
Yes, I was able to record it, and I am going to be posting it probably later tonight. And
Okay,
then,
thank you
yeah,
very much.
yes, yeah. But hopefully you're able to stay on for tonight as well. I think you'll
Yes.
enjoy it.
Thank you.
Is your little guy going to make an appearance tonight, Anthony?
He's upstairs with mommy right now.
Okay.
We'll see. He's been kind of he's 3. He's been kind of a 3-year-old.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I sure do enjoy your little stories of him online.
Hey, he just went to the dentist today, and he was like, "I liked it." I'm like, "When you're 3, they don't do anything. They just, they brush your teeth, and then they like use the fancy thing to brush your teeth." And he was
Mhm.
like, "Oh, sweet."
Good. It was a good experience for him. That's
Mhm.
really good.
Oh, yeah,
That
like,
that can sometimes go a bad direction, and
I'll see you later. Bye bye. You're welcome.
I actually like going to the dentist. So like I'm the one who takes him. My wife is the exact opposite. She just hates the dentist. But she doesn't want
okay.
to like let that carry over.
Right, right. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, we don't
She's
want to say things like, you don't have to be scared, because he might be like, well, I never even thought about being scared.
right.
What are you talking about?
So like while I was there, I was like, oh man, the polish is coming up. Daddy really likes getting his teeth polished. It's very fancy. And I was
Yeah,
excited
yeah.
about it.
Oh, that's great. That's wonderful.
How's Tyra? I hear he
He's
just
do-
got Greek something or other. Greek
Mr.
King?
Greek.
Mr. Greek, yes.
Yes. It's so funny. It's so great. I mean, it was actually a really neat thing.
Awesome.
But yeah, I never thought that I'd have a son who'd be Mr. Greek. I never thought he'd ever join a fraternity, but it's been really good for him. He was an only child, and so he's got all these brothers now that he just loves, and
Awesome.
just seeing him fit in with all of them, and that's been fun.
Mhm.
mic come through.
Not to get too personal. Logan, is that a picture or a painting?
Looks like a picture.
Hmm.
I am actually in a room in a hotel or a B&B in Vegas right now.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
Nice.
wow.
No.
my mom's getting married and we just got here today and
Oh,
Oh, that's cool.
now I'm here.
wow. How exciting is that? That's great. You might be the
So-
first time I've ever had a student ever log in from Vegas, or at least that I've known of, maybe, right? Maybe it's happened.
Yeah. I mean, I guess you never would have known if you didn't really ask for the painting, huh?
Exactly,
Mhm.
exactly.
It looks like a picture to me though,
Yeah.
but it is on a canvas like a painting. So
Mhm.
We do have one of our students who isn't able to join us, but she lives in France and she's in our class. And but because of the time difference, she'll watch a recording. So, but yeah, she's actually a nun in France, which I just think I've never had a nun in my class that I've been aware of before either. So it's pretty cool. Okay, well, it is 7:02, so we'll go ahead and get started. We'll probably have a few other people that will pop in, but welcome everybody. Thanks for having your microphones on mute. That's really helpful. And thanks for putting your names up on the screen. And thanks for having your cameras on so that Anthony feels like he's actually talking to people. And so Anthony was so nice to join us tonight. I have a few things to tell you guys about Anthony. But first thing to know is that Anthony was in your shoes. Gosh, when was it, Anthony?
Almost
15,
20 years at this point.
Yeah, about 20 years ago. So,
Yeah.
so he was a student in Education 202, but he took it in person. And
I also took it twice.
I was just
so
going to share that. So
mhm.
I'm so glad that you did that. So the first time that I had Anthony, he kind of disappeared partway through the quarter. And I was like super sad because he had great things to share in class and such. And he just, it just wasn't, college just wasn't a good match at that time for Anthony. And then you came back, what, like 2 years later?
About 2 years later. Yeah. I had worked at Fred Meyer long enough.
Yeah. And then he came back and it was like, and he still had the same energy, but then he just had the work ethic and just the drive to do it. And not only did Anthony then graduate from Whatcom and then go on to get his teaching certificate, but when he left Whatcom, he was actually honored as the top graduate in our education program. There's a special ceremony that we have. And so he went from kind of disappearing out of a class to then being a stellar student in my class and in other classes. And just so it's been really neat that I've been able to stay connected with Anthony and just to see him grow as a teacher. But let me tell you some more about him. Anthony has been in education since he was about 17 years old, because he first of all did some work in with childcare, and then he also was a middle school coach with wrestling, track, and football. And he also worked as a paraeducator in some elementary schools. He did some sub working, and then you work like one-on-one and kind of did some general duty kinds of things. So, I mean, he was really getting lots and lots of experience working with kids. For the last 6 years, he's been a middle school classroom teacher, and he currently is also the district secondary STEM facilitator. So we'll get to ask him about that. It's his first year in that role. He worked mostly in Bellingham, but then for the last 6.5 years as a certificated teacher, he's been working for Renton School District. And he honestly feels like he's really lucked out with those two school districts that he's been able to work with, because he feels like it's been a good match to his personal teaching philosophies, and that they both really value giving students autonomy and individual power over learning. And he knows that not all school districts value those things. He first of all earned his certification as a paraeducator And then he got his AA from Whatcom, and then he got his bachelor's degree in communications, math, and history from Western Washington University. And then he got his master's degree online through Western Governors University. So you guys are definitely going to want to probably ask him about some questions about that. He has some hobbies that he thinks really work out nicely with being a middle school teacher. He's kind of interested in how do you say, is it anime? I want to make sure I say that right. You can tell that I'm really into that. And he likes the old stuff and the new stuff. And he likes kind of doing like retro old games and things. And
For me, they're just regular
says
games. For my
he had
students,
a
they're retro
student
old
come in
games.
and say, so what was it like when Nintendo 64 came out? You were like there. And like a student was like in awe of that. And so he just thinks that's just like so awesome. And so, so you guys got to read about Anthony. There was like that very first assignment we did of the quarter where it was talking about teaching during the pandemic. Anthony wrote about kind of he had done a Facebook posting about what it's like to teach students online, and then I had asked him for permission to share that in class, and we're still reading that, Anthony. I have like a whole bunch of different teachers and their reactions to teaching online, and yours is one of my favorite. So, so you guys have already kind of had a chance to get to know Anthony a little bit. So tonight's going to be really just about asking Anthony questions. And the way that you're going to get to do that is you can write a question in the chat, and I'll be happy to read it. You can also just write the word question, and then that would mean that you want me to call on you so that you can ask the question in your own words. That's wonderful. And then we'll just get to hear some great things from Anthony. And so I see we already have some questions. And then Anthony, you can certainly feel like if you want to, you can look through the chat, but most of the time people find it kind of distracting. And so I'll be the facilitator, so you don't have to like look through the chat questions or anything like that. Okay.
Oh, I'm very comfortable doing both. I mean,
okay,
I did it for
that's
a hot
true.
minute.
I'm sure that you've got lots of experience doing that. So let's see. Okay, it looks like these were some people that were logging off after my last class right before this. Okay, so let's start with when you talked about getting your master's degree. Did you teach before you got your master's degree and then went back and get your master's degree, or was getting your master's degree part of getting certified? And like kind of talk us through that.
Do you want the truncated version or like the full deal story? Like, what are you guys looking for? If you don't say anything, I'm going to give you the whole story. So I will be honest, I was not superbly, I didn't stay a great student. We'll put it that way. So getting into woodring became a little difficult. So instead of going the woodring route, the reason
I'm going to stop you there just for a sec, just in case.
Oh,
I think most of you are aware that the college at Western that teaches teachers is called Woodring College of Education. So when he talks about Woodring, he's talking about Western.
Yeah. My grades were fine, but I had a B- in one class, and they're like, we only accept it if you have a B. And I was like, So I did not get my teaching certificate from Western. I got my general studies bachelor's degree with a focus in communications and math. And then I was a para that was the only job I was willing to do. Like if it wasn't going to get me into a classroom, I wasn't going to do it anymore. So I stopped working at Fred Meyer, etc. For those, you should know what a para is, but basically every job in a school that isn't done by a teacher is done by a para or a counselor. And so like I did lunchroom duties, I did recess duties, I did like one-on-ones with life skills students. Difficulties of being a para, Sophia. You know what? We'll talk more about WGU after this, but like the difficulties of being a para really depends on which para job you are doing. Sometimes the difficulties was not really having enough authority in what happens. So if I'm in a small group in a teacher's classroom, it's still that teacher's classroom, and there's like this kind of a hierarchy. You don't say it, but it's there. Um, and some teachers are very stringent about like, this is what happens, and this is when it happens, and this is it. And so that was kind of hard to not have like any actual say when I'm like, but I'm with this kid every day. I'm telling you, like, here's my suggestion. So that was one of the hard things, is getting through that. It does help you develop a way to speak your voice, because you're always going to stand up for the kid no matter what, without like causing too much conflict, right? So I really had to like learn that voice of, hey, this is your classroom, but I have a lot of experience with this kid, because I am with this kid in music when you are not. I am with this kid in PE when you are not. I am with this kid on recess when you are not. Like, I know what I'm saying. So how do you develop that voice? The second part that I want to say is hard to think about, and a lot of kids or a lot of people don't think about this. When my now wife, then girlfriend, first moved into me, she was shocked to find all of the like bite and claw marks up and down my arm, because sometimes that's what you get when you're at one-on-one para. Like, those kids, they need you for a reason, and they don't have that bit. So I actually had gotten just numb to it. Like, I was just like, oh yeah. Those are my bite marks. They're always there. So that's the other thing. So there's that mental, and then that actual physical toughness of that. So there's some pretty tough parts of it. Do you think that online teaching can replace offline teaching in arts and social sciences disciplines in the future? Short answer, yes. Long answer, yes, but with a lot of caveats, right? Um, there are some students who are better suited for online learning, for whatever subject it is. That's kind of the thing with differentiation. The You cannot teach everybody the same way, which means sometimes the way we're not used to will be better for other kids. You have to have the right teacher, you have to have the right program, you have to have a lot of stuff prepped and ready for that. But yeah, I think it's totally possible. So those are the questions in the chat. I'll try to recatch that thread. So I was a para. I didn't get my teaching certs at Washington, but because I'd been a para for so long, I started looking for different routes to getting my certification, because there's three main routes to getting your certification. And it honestly just ended up being easier to get my master's degree from WGU. I'm actually answering this question now. How much did being a para prepare you to be a classroom teacher? So it did two major things. One, it actually got me my certification. Like, my experience in the classroom is how I was able to get my master's degree through Western Governors University, and it only took me 1 year. Like, getting a master's degree in 1 year is not normal, but because I had that experience, like, all my essays were stupid easy to write. They were like, hey, hypothetically, if a kid did this, what would you do? I was like, well, last month, this is exactly what I did, and this was the results, and this is my documentation. I already have data for it, right? So I didn't have to be hypothetical about anything. So it was pretty nice. So I got to write all my essays, got to do all that jazz, and I got my teaching certification. And my first year teaching, I got the best compliment I've ever received. And office ladies, I don't know how to describe this. I'm just going to be blunt with it. The people in the office run the school, right? I'm not talking about the principals. I'm talking about the secretaries and nurses and all those folks. So those people in the office, I was going in there, and like halfway through the year, I mentioned that this was my first year teaching. And Martha was like, this can't be your first year. And that was the best compliment you could possibly get from somebody that well experienced. And that really was because I'd been in classrooms. I always focused on my students, and that's kind of that good thing to do. Oh, what do I mean by the people in the offices run the school? So your registrar decides which kids go in which classes. Like, you might think that might be like the department heads or the principals, but no, it's your registrar. If I didn't have a good relationship with Lorinda, I couldn't get kids into the classes they needed to get into. Okay, your nurses, particularly now, decide who gets to stay in the building. Like, and there's nobody else who can argue with the nurses for that. Like, quite literally, that's that. Also, your attendance ladies, your everybody else who just is in that main office, that you as a student may not know their names. They are the ones who tell the principals where to go. They are the ones who know who has detention and who doesn't. They are the ones who knows that you don't do detention anymore, so stop offering that. Like, they had all that information. Uh, yeah. Do you think introverted people are suitable to be teachers, and what advice can you give them? Yes, and I'm going to scroll up real quick to see if I missed anything. Working as a para right now. Oh yeah, if you're working as a para right now, I commend you and I hope you keep that up. All right, so introverted people suitable to be teachers, and what advice can you give them? Yes, I'm probably not the best person to give an introvert advice, as I am not that. So it would be kind of like, I don't know, I don't think it would be genuine advice, right? I could do my best guess, but I really couldn't. I will say this, I have seen many introverts as teachers. And I can, this isn't advice, but this is kind of like a hazard. A lot of the teachers, I would say maybe 4 introvert teachers I know of, are able to speak to their students because they kind of look down on their students. So please don't take that route. Like, they don't see them as the people enough to be worried about speaking in front of them. And so I would hazard against that. Like, if that's how you feel and you're like, I'm comfortable talking to kids because they're kids, pick something else, please. But that's not advice. I'm sorry, but it's still just like a thing that kind of bugs me.
Mhm. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. I mean, advice overall, whether you're introverted or not, as long as you can pay attention to kids, that's kind of it. Uh, if you can really pay attention to not just like, not just their scores, not just their grades, but like, it's sad story time, I guess. I have had multiple kids, and you can see when they drop. Like, you can tell when their scores go down and when they drop. And I never look at them and go, "Hey, your scores are lower. Work harder." My first question is like, "Hey, what's up? Like, how are things going?" Right? So like I said, sad story time. A few times when you ask that question, you're going to get answers that you do not expect. One time I was talking to a kid in the library and he mentioned that, like, oh yeah, my dad came home drunk and like, I got this bruise, and huge bruise right here. Yeah, he's not focusing on school. It's clear. Now, I am a mandatory reporter. I had to do that report thing. Hopefully your school is like prepared as mine is. I literally just had to tell the counselor and then they took care of the rest. And I don't actually know what happened after that, but I did have the kid in my class for the remainder of the school year. So, these are things that
Yeah.
do you commonly find teachers that don't see?
Yeah, think how sad that would have been if you just all you were talking to that student was about getting caught up with work.
Right.
But you opened the door and said, "Hey, what's up?" And it was just
Yeah.
a simple question, but it made a huge difference.
Right. And the thing about that is he said it as though it was not a big thing, because like that's his life,
Right.
And sometimes these things are just a student's life. They're not going to show it unless you ask. Okay. Do you commonly find teachers that don't see students? If you see this, how do you approach the student and or teacher? I would like to say no, but the answer is yeah. I mean, of course. It's actually the main reason I chose my new position with the district as a facilitator. So like, instead of being in my classroom where I have like, the focus, I do the things. I am now able to go out to other teachers. I do observations, I have mentees, I do, I run a lot of different meetings and things of that sort. But I will say this from perspective of being a teacher, like a partner pair, with a you know, a PLC, if you will. I have he's a friend of mine. I played board games with this man outside of the school. He doesn't see his kids. He gave a speed test, which I'm already against for one, but he gave a speed test where students have to get 100% of the questions correct before they're allowed to do anything else, right? So the first thing I do when I have to address him is I was just like, hey man, I can't pass this test and I have a master's degree in mathematics. I cannot finish all 20 of these questions in a minute and a half. You sure you want to give this to eighth graders? You know, that's the first bit. You have like that layer of like, hey, we're friends, here's some camaraderie. I still trust that you care about students. He said, yeah, he kept giving it, and it was a thing. And at that point, it was mostly just like, all right, man, look, so that's not how standards-based grading goes. You can't actually make that. Like, I just pulled out the rules. Like, that can't be part of what you do. And then after that, I just went to AP because, again, I'm always about my students before anything else, including my friendships.
Okay, so talk about, not everybody's going to know what AP is.
Oh, sorry. AP is assistant principal. And it depends. You might have like the principal that's more hands-on, but usually assistant principals are kind of where you go to for things like that, depending on, you know, your school district and your building. Were you worried to report abuse? Yes, yes. Oh my God, yes. Since that report might make the situation worse, 100% yes, worried about it. I think that is actually one of the reasons why I don't have a choice. If you become a teacher, a para, whatever, it's straight up, you sign the contract, you are a mandatory reporter. And I think that's why they do that. There's no choice in it. You have to report abuse, okay? Because it is worrisome. It's a hard thing to do, but I also wouldn't want to like find out that like things went too far and that kid didn't show up to school and then I'm going to a funeral because I didn't feel like saying something. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So there are so many things that are tough that you don't really get to hear about. Like I've cried more at this job than anything I can imagine. Okay, and I'm not going to be like I'm like manly man or whatever. I don't like that toxic masculinity thing, but like I don't cry super often until I was in this job where you have 150 kids who you might be the only person who actually cares about them, and you care about them so much. So yeah, you worry about the consequences, but also like a good counselor and a good like school system makes that work out pretty well.
Yeah.
And like I said, that student stayed with me the rest of the year. So, you know, things worked out
Mhm.
pretty well. And he's not the only time I've had to report.
Yeah. You know, Anthony, one of my stories from my teaching is, you know, I did many reports as well. And this, you know, you don't often get this, but I had a family that was very mad at me about the reporting because there were some consequences that happened. And then it was about 4 years later, I noticed in the new school year was going to begin, and I noticed that the little brother of this person I had made that report for was assigned to my class. So I went to the principal and I said, I really don't think you should put him in my room because there was a problem with this family before where they were really mad at me because I made that report. And she said, no, they requested you. And so you know, you don't know. And then it came down to later that year, the mom confided in me that, you know, their family got the help that they needed because of that. And that she said, you know, I hated you at first. She said, but that was the best thing that anyone's ever done. And so, you know, you're not going to get to hear that most of the time as a teacher, but, you know, my one time in the 33 years, you know, so yeah, so it's a really, really hard decision to make, but you just have to know that it's the best decision to make.
Just to tag on that, yeah, you don't usually hear the 4 years later part,
Yeah.
but you definitely get to hear a lot of the like, I hated you. Unless you have like a good counselor system and all that jazz, in which case they mitigate a lot of that. All right. what led you to becoming a teacher? What is your favorite thing about teaching? Oh, um, favorite thing is kind of broad and big, but what led me to becoming a teacher? Uh, right out of high school, actually, I worked at a daycare, as Roth mentioned earlier, and I had no intention of being a teacher at all. It wasn't even on my short list. I was going to be a writer. That was like goal number one. Like I had the name of the magazine I was going to create all read out, and like I was a publisher pro. But out of high school, I didn't go immediately to college, so I got the job that was down the street from my house, which was working at a daycare. And I distinctly remember, and this is a very strange thing, this little girl was like ignoring her toys, and she was just like picking at my fingers. I don't know how I best to describe that, but she was literally just like messing with the dry skin on my fingers. And at that moment, I was like, oh, I think I kind of like kids. It's a very strange bit. And and yeah, and then I reminded myself I didn't want to be a teacher. I did some other jobs in the interim, and then I just kind of like, boom, yeah. So to answer the two things of favorite part of teaching is not actually the teaching part. It's no, that's a lie. I'm still teaching. I don't. How do I describe this? It's talking to kids. It's literally talking to kids. It's my favorite thing. I do teach math, and I teach math very well. But for the most part, I had a kid come back to me after he'd been in high school. So I had him as a sixth grader. He's a junior in high school. He comes back to me because he found out I got married, and he wanted to say congratulations. And he looks at me, and this kid, I guarantee you, never took a single note in the years I'd ever never written anything down. But he looks at me and says, congratulations on getting married. But how are you certain that you're in love? I thought you said that love was something you couldn't define. And I was like, you remember me saying something about love 5 years ago? Huh. Because I don't believe love is something you can define. You know, it's true. I don't believe that. He remembered this. And he was like, congratulations, but are you certain? And I was like, okay. So the connection I made with this kid wasn't about math. It was about like how a relationship should be, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And like, that's what he took to heart. There are so many things that they take to heart. And I love that immensely. The next question was, to go off that question, was the hardest part of teaching. It's the fact that you have to, the caring is very hard. I know people don't say that often, but like caring is hard. It's draining. You worry about your students in ways you didn't know. But like I would go home some days on particularly rough days and sit down and not be able to stand up. Not because I was like physically tired, but just the weight of those kids, it weighs on you. So it's very hard, but it's super gratifying once you go through that caring and you see the results, and they come back to tell you how great things are. They do. I just got an email last week from a girl who's like, I got accepted into the UW School of Engineering, and she's like, what? And then like, I was like, sweet, congratulations. Like, but she's like, no, you don't get it. Like, I didn't like school until like your class. I didn't even know I was good at math. And like this UW School of Engineering is not easy to get into if you don't like math, right? So like these little things make it like super worthwhile. And I really dig like those connections, and that I literally changed that girl's life, right? Like it's amazing to me. So that's the best part. It's also the scariest part. What do you think of preschool education? Do you mind going into more detail about what you mean by preschool education? Because there's a couple of different. Do you mean, do I believe that we should have state-funded pre-K? Do you mean that like, should preschool education be actual like education, or is it just daycare? Well, I answered both of those questions. Yes, we should have state-funded pre-K. particularly as we need dual income housing. I think we should just start that a little bit earlier. And I also have a good friend who is also a union rep who is a pre-K teacher and had to go to kindergarten when she moved to her new district. Our students who have experienced preschool education better than those who have not. I'm never going to say any kid is better than the other kid. I mean, I don't care where you're going through, but I will say that a kid who's gone through a comprehensive pre-K going into a public school has had more resources available to them than a kid who hasn't, right? And I'm not like getting down on your wording for that, you know what I mean? But yeah. Am I board certified? What is your sense? Oh,
Yeah, like
okay.
we've been looking at national board certification.
So I've been honest, I might as well. I failed my national board certification twice.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh.
Now, the thing about that is weird, the first time I failed it, I didn't double space.
Mm.
I failed.
So it's just
Literally.
just a formatting issue.
Yeah, I did not double space, and so I failed. The second time I failed was when I was trying to get it done like during the pandemic, and they're like, yeah, you have to have kids on camera. No, the chat stream doesn't count. And I was like, dude, I can't force a kid to turn on their camera. And also, like, I did, like, we had hybrid at the end of the year. So I did have a kid on camera help me with this like math experiment, which was, I thought, really awesome. We filled a cone with water and then took that water and filled it into a cylinder of the same height to figure out the formula between cone and cylinder. It was a great idea. I loved it. It was fantastic. But they were just like, no, we needed to have kids on screen. So I don't even know if like what I wrote was good enough or if I did something wrong or bad teaching. I just know I didn't hit the format, so they didn't grade my stuff. So,
Oh, Anthony, that just it's like everything about a teacher that like you are like that you're about. It's like they were like they're saying what quality teaching is, but then yet what are they doing with you? Like they're not really looking at the quality of your teaching. It's all about this formatting. That frustrates me.
right. Well, because Pearson aren't teachers. Pearson
Right.
are graders.
Right.
Right. And so that's kind of that thing is in order to be a fair grader, they have to follow this exact set of rules. And some people at Pearson have never taught a day in their life.
Mhm.
It is what it is.
Mm.
Now, the question is, do I try again for a third time? Probably not. To be perfectly honest. I still have to think about it. There are other routes to recertification that don't cost as much as national board certification cost. Because yes, I did have to pay for each one of those components that I failed to, and then I had to pay to do them again.
Mm.
Yeah. I do know plenty of board certified teachers who are fantastic teachers, but it has not worked out for me. Yeah, it's a good question though. I think when I was in your shoes, I didn't know what board certification was. Yeah.
One of the modules that we've been looking at is legal issues for teachers and students. So have there been any situations where you've been involved in like kind of anything where like as a teacher you were kind of making a legal decision or where a student got in trouble legally or anything like that?
I am ancillary or tertiary to all these stories. Me personally, no issues. But that is mostly because one of the things we did at Whatcom before I left is we actually had like a meeting with a lawyer and we were just like, hey, we gotta, he just went over all these things that you should and should not do. So like for 3 years, my door never closed. I was never with any kids by myself. You know, just never. I will mention the stories that have happened though. So some of them are big deals. So I had a assistant principal who came into my office one day. He was not my admin, just to make sure you understand this part for the story. Each admin kind of has their own group of teachers that they like observe and focus on and like do the advising. So he was not my admin. And he came into my room and he talked about a particular student who was like, "Did you hit her in the head?" I was like, "That is a stupid question. You know damn well I didn't hit nobody in the head." Sorry, like for this way, but like that is just
Yeah.
ridiculous. So here's the thing. He had been hitting students and he eventually got fired for such a thing. But he was trying to like kind of project onto me because I was the only other black man in the like school. And so if they got us all mixed up, it would have been fine. But like he mentions this and I talked to the kid and she's like, "What?" Like now the only thing she says is like, "You did just get that new, like I had just gotten married and my wedding ring is a chunk of metal. It's pretty big. And I usually like hit kids on the head like this and be like, hey." And she's like, "That's kind of hard." I'm like, "Oh, thank you for letting me know that." Because like I was, when you first get married, you don't think about the dang thing. That was the only thing she had to say to me about anything. He did get fired. He is no longer allowed around children for obvious reasons. But that's the closest I've ever come to like legal issues. And the other things that are like lawsuit wise is really just the fact that we're mandatory reporters. So I have to report such things. I haven't been called in to do any witnessing, haven't had that happen yet, but I have written a lot of reports. Please make sure you're able to write clearly and describe everything you see because you never know like what gets called into play. And the other bit is I was a union rep for some time. And so as a union rep, if anything happens with a union member, they are allowed to have you there to represent them and like be on their side. So again, documenting exactly what is stated by, you know, the admin to the teacher and so on and so forth. There are these things called grievances that we can do as a union to say that like, hey, the admin is not following our union contract, things of that sort. So I do have to know the contract really well. But again, I haven't had to meet with a, oh, that is a lie. I have had to meet with a lawyer, but only for union contract stuff, not for like student things.
Like what
You
would
guys-
be like a typical grievance like that a staff member would have, like to where they're feeling like the contract's not being followed?
So every teacher is afforded what's called CNP, their conference and planning time. Particularly in this year where we didn't have subs at the beginning of the year, a lot of teachers were being called on to cover other people's classes during their conference and planning time. And yeah, it's in the contract that we should cover classes because you don't want to leave kids alone. But if you are being called on to do that more than once in a week, then you're breaking contract. And that was happening a lot, particularly this year. Again, for obvious reasons, because we didn't have subs at the beginning of the year. That was pretty widespread. Yeah, I mean, the unions are different in each district. And you really, I recommend that you get involved enough to know what your contract is. And you have a good relationship with whoever your union rep is.
Now, when you say contract, like I think a lot of times people think contract, they think 1 or 2 pages. Like how many pages long is your contract, like approximately? Like it's like a little book, right?
It is a full-on book. We have, so we'll put it this way. So I was on the bargaining team and I have added myself 14 pages to the contract. And I have taken out myself 16 pages to the contract and it's still like 90 pages long. Okay, it's a lot. I'm not telling you to read 90 pages and memorize, that's no, but every part of it that says the teacher must do, you should know that. Admin is allowed to do, you should know that. Or at the very least, like I said, have a good relationship with your union rep. And if your building does not have a union rep, be it. Just become it because it's necessary to have one, period. Like, I know when I was in Rock's class and in class with Deborah Seabury, I never thought about unions. I was like, yeah, sure, unions. They make my paycheck get higher. That is not the only thing they do. So like, yeah, get real comfortable with your union reps.
Mhm.
Yeah. Oh, you mean now or when I was a teacher? The question is, what does an average day at school look like for you? Where now I'm what's called a facilitator, but do you want to know the teacher day or the facilitator day? Or
Maybe you
both?
can tell us both.
Yeah, sure, sure. So teacher day, we have this, yeah. So teacher day, we have advisory in my school district. So we start off with the first 15 minutes of the day is doing SEL, that's social emotional learning. So that's stuff like, you know, hey, you and your friends are having like a tiff. How do you get over it? I don't say tiff to the kids, they don't know what that is, but you know, and we talk about things of that sort. I specifically remember one day I needed to learn some stuff. I had a Vietnamese student basically teaching the class about like Islam. And I was like, oh, sweet, neat. How do you know this much stuff about like Islam? He's like, because I'm Muslim. And and we like looked it up and like Vietnam is like majority Muslim. And I did not know that at the time. But you know, things of this stuff that you just kind of like let the kids kind of start the day off with like, hey, how you doing? What's your life like before we get into content? So that's homeroom or advisory, whatever you want to call it. First period, start off with an entry task. Always start off with an entry task for a number of good reasons. So if you don't know what an entry task is, it's when your kids walk into the room, they just have something on the board or on their Chromebook or somewhere where they know this is the thing we do at the very beginning of the day. Okay. For me, most of the times that entry task was to basically prep them for the lesson that we're about to do. So it's igniting previous learning. So if we're going to be working with like rational numbers, I would have them do something with fractions and then be like, oh, you don't know what a rational number is? All that stuff you just did, those are rational numbers because we can write them as a fraction. And I'd make sure it pieced together. Make sure there was some sort of bridge between the entry task, which should be easy, something that you can all finish in about 5 minutes, and then whatever we do for the lesson. And then I would also just kind of like, so when the entry task was done, that's when I did my attendance. That's when I did my like daily check-ins with kids. I would just be like, all right. I'd walk around to see if they like had questions about whatever we did yesterday, and just like all while other kids are doing the entry task. And I'm just kind of walking around. If it's Monday, I ask how the weekend was every Monday, always. We don't get started right in on math because we don't need to. When the math lesson comes, I always give some sort of preamble and then make sure there's some sort of connection to like something they care about. For middle school, usually it all revolves around something about buying something. And like, you know, toss up a picture of like toilet paper rolls or something like 2 rolls equals 48 rolls. Does it though? And then we talk about what 1 roll is in that, you know, always something that's real. And then we do the book work, which is usually group work. And teachers disagree with me on this one, but I believe if students finish what you've assigned, let them be kids for the day. So I actually have a lot of free time on my day. My lessons, I try to keep between 7 and 20 minutes long. I shouldn't be talking for more times than the kids are talking. So 7 to 20 minutes. So like right now, I have spoken to you way more than I would speak to any of my 8th graders or 6th graders. Like I would have been like, no, you guys turn now. But this is a different thing. So yeah. And then, you know, we do some group work. We go over misconceptions. We do a summary. Boom, that's 1 period done. Next period may be the same class, may not be, but it's the same basic premise. Entry task, walk around, get to know the kids, a little bit of group work, walk around, try to see what they're doing. My teaching style was always to hear what their thoughts were and expound upon them. There was very rarely where I was like, this is the way I do it, so please write it down and do what I said. What I usually do is like, oh, oh, Emily, that's a really good idea. You mind if I share it with the rest of the class? And then I will share that. And I'll be like, Carly, did you hear what, Alexis was doing over at their group? It was a pretty great idea. And then I would do stuff like this. It was always attributed back to a student. So that's the reason I'm always talking about walking around and hearing what they're doing. Because, I'm 20 years older than these kids. They should not care what I have to say. So I use what they say. Yeah. And then, like, I always make sure somewhere in the week, they should have some time to not be working. Like, even if, like I said, like they finish the lesson, they free time at the end of the day, or like free time Friday or something like that. A middle school kid, elementary kid, even high school kids, they need some time where they know they're not going to have to be like busy because they're still kids. I'm not busy the entire week of my work day, right? Like, I get up and I go talk to my like office mate neighbors now. So yeah, teaching, you make your routine. It is what it is. This job, where I'm a facilitator, every day is different. I spent Tuesday just making a proposal for what tier math should look like across the district. Tier math is basically like math support for students who need a little extra help in math. And there's a lot of teachers who do whatever they want with it, which is actually okay. I'd rather them just do whatever they want with it. But there's also a lot of teachers who are like, I don't know how to teach this class. What should I do? And so I spent all of Tuesday telling them what they should do. I put in like, these things can count as assessments. These are the different types of like digital like learning tools that you can use. This is how you work with like rotation centers. This is how you do a flipped classroom. Attendance should not matter for this particular class. Effort grades count as this. So I spent all of Tuesday at my desk typing that out, putting it into a PowerPoint, putting it into like 3 different formats. So whoever wanted to read it had 3 different ways they could read it. That was Tuesday. Wednesday, I went to watch a science teacher teach. And I gave him notes on what I saw that was awesome. I asked the kids about like what they were working on. And then I took everything I saw in that class and I went to a different science class and was like, hey, these are some cool things I just saw. You should try these out for your next unit, yada, yada. And I wasn't in my office at all that day. I just went from classroom to classroom to classroom, just looking at what I saw, taking notes, and then just kind of sharing insight. And then at the end of the day, I do go to my office and I like write up reports for everybody that I talk to, and so that they have like a record of what we spoke about and things of that sort. So my current job is very varied. And then there's one more, I also get to create classes. Like we literally were like, hey, our ELL students don't actually have anything to help them access math if they come here from like Honduras and they've never done math before. What can we do? So I created a class called ELL Math that, had to be approved by the district, but I'm the one who got to approve it. It was very strange. I was like, I'm signing off on my own class. This is neat. So yeah, so different stuff. Do you miss teaching? Yes. Or do you like what you're doing right now? Yes. I did actually go back to teaching for a week this year, and it verified 2 things for me. It verified that I'm still good at teaching, so I felt pretty good about that. And it also verified that I did in fact make the right choice. That week, my blood pressure is high, so I can't really stay in a classroom that much anymore. Like, this is a weird thing to say, but it's like my kid's 3. So I either have enough patience for a 3-year-old or I have enough patience for 150 middle schoolers. I can't really do a 3-year-old and 150 middle schoolers on a regular, but I might go back when he's a little bit older,
Yeah, but when you taught for that week, it's different because I mean, you're so relational based. So we're, whatever kids you were teaching, like you didn't it's harder. Like you basically stepped in like kind of like a sub then.
Kind of, sort of. those are my kids. Rock, I haven't posted about this because it's a bad situation. So I applied for my job in the summer, and I told my principal that I was applying for this job in an email. I actually asked him if he would be like a reference. He never responded to my email. Okay. I interviewed for the job in the summer. I got the job in the summer. My principal apparently acted as though nobody told him that I was leaving. So I started this year teaching my class because I wasn't going to just leave them without anybody. I actually had to stay on and do part of the interviews for my replacement. Right. So when I went back for that week, those are my kids who I already taught at the beginning of the year.
Okay.
So that actually made it double hard because I had to leave them twice. And so I already had the relationship because I'd been with them at the beginning of the year. When I left, they were, my replacement was not the person I chose in the interviews. It was somebody else who I was like, she left without telling anybody. Like I got an email from one of my students that was like, oh yeah, she hasn't been here since you left. I was like, I'm sorry, what? It was like a Thursday, and Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, she wasn't there. She showed up on Friday, and then next Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, she wasn't there.
Oh.
So this year has been like a real, like a big stressor. And then we finally did get a replacement for me. And he was like, hey, I need to take a little time off so I can finish like my master's degree. Can you cover my class for a week? And I was like, that makes sense. I can do that for a week. And he didn't come back after the week was over.
Oh.
So yeah, I'm that's the kind of the roller coaster that is this year. Like it's a weird thing.
Yeah.
So that is why going back, I did have the relationship, but it wasn't the same.
That's
There's
hard.
a lot more to that as well. It was very, very is the teacher's job in your school tenure track position? I don't think I know. Tenure, you usually hear more for professors than for secondary teachers, usually. But it's
But
about
like
the
probably
same.
the language that you guys would use would probably be a continuing contract.
Yeah, I
that-
mean,
yeah.
after 3 years, I have a continuing contract, right? So
Yeah. So that's
yeah.
kind of the same thing. I mean, so a continuing contract means like you're guaranteed that job. I mean, things have to go pretty bad for you to lose a job with a continuing contract.
yeah, generally speaking, particularly if your union's doing their job correctly. As a math teacher, how do you prefer to communicate its importance and relevance in society? Would you consider it useful to draw comparisons between math and other subjects like language or art to hold the attention of less interested math learners? Oh, most definitely. You make the comparisons. Communicate its importance and relevance in society. So I have a honesty theory with my kids, right? You know, you're going to hear the question, when am I ever going to need this? And my answer is always, I don't know. You might not, because it's true. You might not. I was talking to my wife earlier today, and she is like doing something, 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 and I was like, "Oh, that's calculus, baby." And she's like, "I don't know any calculus." I'm like, "Yeah, you don't need to. Why would you?" So sometimes you'll need it, sometimes you won't. And I always correlate it to something they care about. If I have a kid, like art and math go hand in hand. Like if anybody ever tells you that art is logic or that art is one side of the brain and math is the other, they're wrong. They're connected. It's one of those beautiful things about making sure your kids know you and know your hobbies. When we talk about anime is when I'm talking about math. Excuse me for 1 second. Probably should have muted instead of just moving my headset. Whatever, it's a thing. But no, when my kids and I talk about anime, we're talking about math that matters to them. It's not about calculating stuff, but you're like, One Piece has over 1,000 episodes. If you've watched all of One Piece, how many hours have you spent watching TV? Like, it's not that hard to like make it something they care about, right? So do that. Actually, that's a lie. It's not. It's not. It's it's not easy. But once you find a track in, then it becomes simpler. You just got to make sure you find that track and you find it every year. But I'm not going to say it's not that hard. That's a lie. It is. It is hard. But yeah. Also, if you want to do something called MYP or IB, then it's part of the curriculum that you have to be cross content. IB is called International Baccalaureate, and it's a way to get college credit while you're in high school. And MYP is the middle years program that leads to that. Don't worry about the acronyms, you don't have to know them, but there are many different programs that are basically like, hey, you should teach math at the same time as you teach social studies and science because they're not really distinct from each other. And those are ways that you actually get students to like care a little bit more.
Did you ever collaborate with other teachers of other contents and bring things together?
Constantly. I mean, one of the things I'm actually doing now, even in this job, is I'm trying to get that to happen across the district. What I had students learning about volcanoes in one class, like talking about eruptions that happened in, you know, your social studies class and like the effect they had on different people. And I'm like, well, dude, volcano is just pressure and geometry. Like, you think I can't put that into a math class? Of course I'm going to, right? So we're talking about the volume of cones today. Why? Because you're talking about volcanoes in a different classroom. Let's make it happen. They have to do this distance, rate, time thing with some of their experiments that they do in science class. Distance, rate, time is expressly a math formula. I need to teach them how to balance equations so that they can do their science stuff right. Always. And like the thing about that is I didn't actually start doing that to like my 3rd or 4th year teaching because I didn't know. But once I knew, I like started talking to the other teachers like, hey, art teacher, when are you doing the thing where you do enlargements and stuff like that? Because we also do enlargements. And I would love it if they could do that with you because we have them draw little things on grids and then like expand the grids. Totally an art class thing. You know, so we get together and we have those conversations. And now I get to do that at a district level. So I'm trying to make the math scope and sequence match up a little bit with the science scope and sequence. Scope and sequence is like the rough outline of what you should be teaching when throughout the year. So you get all the things. It's not like set in stone.
What is something that you did early on in your teaching that you've let go?
Everything. Every year you get better, you look back at your last year and you're like, oh, well, that was not very good. I used to keep all my assessments, my tests, and I'm like, yeah, this is a pretty good test. I'll do it again next year. And every year I would look back at that test and go, this is a garbage test. I don't know who ever thought to give this to kids. And I would start again. I think the easiest thing is raising my voice. I don't raise my voice anymore, like not even a little bit. My last year teaching, yeah, I don't think I raised my voice for the last 2 years teaching at all. And I was never like a big like yeller, angry dude, but like when I wanted them to get quiet, it didn't make any sense for me to get louder. So I started just switching it and I would just get quieter. And eventually, you know, like because I'm so relational, like the kids who hear what I say, they'll usually tell other kids to like calm down and then like to hear me. Or what I actually started doing when I got like good at it, I was like, you don't have to tell them anything. Just if you're quiet, then they'll notice. And, you know, I expect the kids to notice their surroundings and their atmosphere. There's a bunch of teachers who are like, oh, my kids can't ever do that. I'm like, give them a chance to. Of course, they didn't do it on day one. Of course, they didn't do it in the first month. But by the time the end of the year comes around, we're like, we have that set up and ready. So yeah, don't raise my voice anymore. So that's like a big thing. The other thing, I don't do detentions anymore. I stopped the detentions Mainly because I had one kid who I would do detentions with. We had lunch detentions all the time, and he never stopped getting lunch detentions. He just got really good at cleaning up the room. So clearly the lunch detentions weren't doing anything, right? Like if they were working, he would stop coming. No. So I don't do detentions anymore. And like now my philosophy is you can't ever punish just one person. Like you have to be punished too. Like, cause his lunch detentions meant I had lunch detention.
Yeah.
Right. Like, so I don't do those anymore either. So it's like the two real things. I don't raise my voice anymore and no more detentions.
What about homework? What's your philosophy and what's your district policies with homework?
No district policy on homework. I am very, I kind of waft with homework, to be perfectly honest. Like, if your homework matters, do it. If your homework is busy work, don't do it. I think there is a benefit to continuing to practice, but I do not think there's a benefit to say like, all right, well, we didn't finish all 50 of these problems in class, finish them at home. Why do you need to do 50? I would much rather give students, so one thing of homework I used to do when I was teaching 6th grade is I would be like, all right, I just want you to spend this week from Monday to Thursday, and on Friday we'll share them out. Tell me about any patterns you notice while you're out and about. What patterns do you see in the world? That's it? Yeah, that's it. Show me some patterns. The more complex the pattern is you see, the better I'll grade you, whatever. And like that used to get like a lot of good responses about the 3rd or 4th time I'd given that homework, right? Because all math really is recognizing patterns, you know? So I would do stuff like that. Not to say that you don't have to do 5 to 10, 15 of these, but yeah. Did you have any behavior problems? If so, how did you deal with them? Yeah, I had behavior problems. I had a girl straight up punch me, like repeatedly. Not in the face, on the arm. Weird thing about her is when I called to have her like removed for the day, as she was being walked out, she's like, I can still be back in here tomorrow though, right? I was like, no, you just hit me. What? No. But she did in fact come back to my class the next year. I had her for 3 years straight because I circulated with my tier class. She's actually pretty great. I love her immensely. I actually 100% know why she decided to hit me. She had some stuff going down. We had some chats. I accepted. Behavior all depends on the kid and the relationship you make, right? Most of my behavior issues were very minimal. Most, I mean, I did just say I got hit. It is what it is. But most of the time, it's a kid looking for attention some weird way. Depending on the kid, I could just clown on the kid, just make fun of him, and it's fine. Depending on the kid, you know. Sometimes it's like a quick conversation out in the hallway. See, oh yeah, so this kid's old enough so I can say his name. So Cedric is a kid of mine. He was a big behavior issue, mostly because he wanted attention, right? I distinctly recall taking him outside to talk one day. But here's the thing. I never stopped teaching to take a kid out in the hallway. Never. If I am talking to the whole class, I will never let one kid take me away from the whole class. Okay. Generally, what I will do is like, hey man, when I'm done with this, you and I are going to talk. You can go wait out in the hallway now, or you can go out with me when we go together later. Right. So kind of that option makes it way different than me just saying like, get out. Right. I'm saying like, you can walk out now, have some time to cool down, or you can walk out with me when I'm done teaching. So you can also learn. Always some sort of option that they're choosing. Okay. I can't emphasize that enough. There's always some option that you're letting them choose. And then like this one day, like Cedric and I, we go out and like, he just cries. I didn't know what's going on. I hug him, tears on my shirt. I'm just like, all right, man, look, you're going through something. If you want to talk to me, you know where I'm at. If you just want some time, have some time. He looks at me, says, I just want some time. He stays outside, we go back in. I can't tell you how to deal with behavior issues simply because you got to have some sort of relationship with the kids that they will let you know how to deal with their behavior. Which means the first month sucks. Not gonna lie, it takes a while before you develop that relationship. Usually a month, 2 months, and you're not going to develop that relationship with every single student. But every single student should know that you're available.
Mhm.
And then, yeah, and then you just kind of work with whatever you need at that time. Most likely, what you're going to get is a kid being defiant. Like not wanting to do what you said just because they don't want to do what you said. Make the choice. Does it really matter that much if they do the thing I said or not? Think about it for a bit. And if it does matter, cool. Explain why it matters to the kid and then move on about your business.
Mhm.
And if it doesn't matter, drop it. Yeah.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah. Just today I was dealing with a student who had written something on like the little whiteboard slate in their classroom, and it was like a funny joke about farting. and so the teacher took the whiteboard slate, and the student was wanting it back to erase it, but the teacher was like thinking for some reason like, no, you wrote it, so I'm gonna, and they were like kind of like battling over it. And so later when I talked with the teacher, I was like, so actually, I mean, that's actually kind of a cool thing that the student wanted to erase it, because it kind of shows that like they regretted it, right?
Mhm.
And here you were in this battle with, no, you can't erase it. Yeah, I want to erase it, and so, just like, yeah, it's like you said, like, just like, what would it matter if the student erased it? And if anything, it kind of shows like, oh, okay, that's
Yeah,
good. I'm glad you want to erase that, because that's not an appropriate place for us to be making jokes like that, right?
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, yeah, it's funny how though in that moment as a teacher, you can get caught up in that. Like, no, I said, no, you can't erase it. And all you think about is like, they're being defiant. And like some of the best advice I ever heard was that you can say, oh, I changed my mind about that.
Mhm.
And oh, I changed my mind. Actually, that's a really good idea to erase that.
Yeah.
And then you're not having to lose face, but they're not having to lose face. And anyway, so yeah,
Mhm.
I think that was really good advice, Anthony.
Yeah. And I can also say it's not even loss of face, really. If
Yeah.
you change your mind in front of kids, you know what happens? They trust you and respect you more.
Yeah.
Like that's it. And
Yeah.
you're gonna get a couple knuckleheads that no matter what you do, they're gonna be knuckleheads. But you decided to work with kids.
Yeah. Well, let's kind of end our time tonight with giving Anthony, letting him hear like what did you hear tonight to where something that really resonated with you, something that was helpful for you, so that Anthony can hear that. And then I think it's good for your classmates to hear it too.
I start.
Sure.
It was directly connected to my question, so it's a little bit of a low-hanging fruit. However, I really appreciate your honesty policy. But stemming from that, it's also important that I actually just find that you're sort of a model teacher for what I am hoping to be, but also what I hope each of my teachers going forward at this level are like, is, just like treat students as other humans, not as these sort of, inferior objects waiting to be built up to put out to the world, and they couldn't possibly be, correct or normal or have any value until they're done with high school, because that's what I felt like going through school all the way until now. And then I'm in school now on this more successful route. And it's also yet again another great example, seeing a teacher who maybe wasn't the most consistent student, who knows the reality of being a bad student, so now has a relatability with other bad students. And that's a huge concept. So the human side of how you're applying yourself to this profession is really, really cool. So thank you for sharing all that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, sometimes I think the best teachers are teachers that learning didn't come easy in school because they do have empathy.
Yeah. I will say multiple times I have looked at a kid and like, man, you're a great kid. You're like a bad student, but like you're a fantastic kid. Like that's okay. Like, you know, the skill set for what students needs to be, you get to decide what that is in your classroom. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
Who else wants to talk with Anthony and give him some feedback there about what you're taking away, Carly?
I guess mine is kind of like a question and a compliment. Being a teacher, do you guys do any, I guess like I underwent Moab training for my job, which is not education, but do you guys do any like management of aggressive behaviors or anything like that to help de-escalate children if they do become too physically aggressive?
yes. Well, depending on your district, of course, obviously. Like, so one of the first trainings I ever did was STAR training, which was not great. And then there's also right response, which a lot of districts are against now, but I've done that training too. Your district will decide what that de-escalation techniques tends to be. My current district, de-escalation techniques are basically like space and time, you know. So uh, you don't need it super often. So that's kind of the thing. But yeah, I mean, we do have those things. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think so much of it is preventative, right?
Mhm.
The more that you can be preventative rather than corrective. You know, a very common saying that a lot of educators use now is connection before correction.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, but you have to know, I mean, what do you do when you're in that moment? Because sometimes, yeah, a student is hitting you or they're hitting somebody else and you can't go, oh, I want to connect with the student right now. So
Yeah.
it's sometimes there are moments where decisions have to be made.
Should probably clarify with the one girl who hit me. She was hitting me on my arm and she definitely was not giving me like the full brunt of her force. Like it was like a power struggle. She had no other way out. And she'd been working with a counselor on like, long story, but yes, for her, that was a very different thing. But most kids, like I think somebody kicked a desk once and we're like, all right, guys, back up away. And then he just kind of like fumed himself out and not like kicking stuff fumed, but like literally like, you know, nothing really happened because what kid wants to kick stuff? Nobody wants to. And like without an audience, because I basically was like, hey, go wait outside, yada, yada, yada. They're waiting in the hallway and called somebody up. And I used that person who I called up to watch my kids in the hallway so that I could stay with him and not be like abandoning. Certain kids, you know, depending on the situation, it might have been better for me to leave. But for that particular kid, I knew that the staying there, like he didn't. There's another hug moment actually. I was like, yeah, but you know, a lot of aggression ends in hugs. What are you gonna do? Even though you talk to people like, you're not supposed to hug kids, you're not supposed to, but yeah.
Who else wants to share? But yes, Emily.
I just liked what you said about having that emotional support system within the school for students. Because a lot of times, even like the smallest of comments that a teacher can make can have such a big impact on a student's life. Just be able to have that outreach and support, but sometimes don't even know they have that, and that can be really special sometimes. So yeah.
Yeah. May?
Thank you. I just wanted to say it was really good because like reading articles, like reading textbook just doesn't contain the real voice and like real experience. it seems really easy to do it, but we have feelings. It's really hard to just like lay down our feeling and stand with the children. Like we sometimes go like, why don't you understand? But like since I was able to hear like even like teachers who have experience go through that, it's a lot for me. Like I was so worried to be a teacher. I don't know whether I can manage my feelings. But yeah, it was really good and it was so like motivating me studying education. So thank you so much.
That's great.
I mean, we're people too, right? Like,
Mhm. Logan?
I just want to say, like, as soon as you kind of came in and you asked me about like my painting or picture, I kind of realized you were a pretty personable person. I really enjoyed everything you kind of had to say. It was very different standpoint from like, I'm very reserved for the most part. So hearing someone who's more interactive with that was definitely interesting. And then I liked your response with my question about the offices in the school, or the office in the school, because I still to this day have a very good relationship with. He was my 8th grade principal to the assistant principal, or my 8th grade teacher to the assistant principal at the high school, now he's the principal at the high school. And I still talk to him on like a face-to-face value. And I knew like how much he did in each role because we would talk about it quite often. And so and I had a really good relationship with a couple of the office ladies as well, just because I came in late often, but a couple lunch attentions here and there. I built good relationships with them. And it was interesting to hear your perspective on how much they run things and how much control they really have over the school that I never really thought about until you said it.
Yeah. You know, when I was teaching up at Western, I would teach this one class where it was their very first practicum experience where they'd be out in the schools. And I would give them a test about like different management techniques and stuff. Well, one test, the first questions on the test were, what is the name of the janitor in the building you're working in? What is the name of the school secretary? What is, and it just said like, these are the important people in the building. Do you know who they are? And then I said, well, don't worry if you didn't get the points on that test, because the same questions will be on the next test and you can make up those points in. And, but so it just reminded them, like, don't just walk by people that work in the building and like think that they don't have an important job, because it literally does take a village.
Also, if you're nice to the lunch ladies, they make you better lunches. Like,
that's important. Let's hear from 2 more people.
I feel like that would be like everybody at that point. Yeah, you got some introverts. You said
Oh, I think we've got like 4 more people that haven't shared. So okay. I thought let's just shoot for 2 more. Yeah, go ahead, Melissa.
It was really interesting and motivating to see like your background of how you were para and how you did other things before you were a teacher. It really motivated me, because sometimes I'm just like, what am I doing? But yeah, it was really interesting too. I had my siblings in here with me and they were listening. They were like, oh, what? Like they were in it, and you kept us really engaged the whole time. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, that's a good sign. Yeah, when other people are joining in on the class, that's awesome.
Good. Thank you.
You have one more person who wants to share something you're taking away from the class? Well, I can just tell you that what I'm taking away is just that reminder that that teaching is, you're just constantly improving. And like how you said, like you'll say, oh, I better keep this test because man, this is a good test. And then the next year you're looking at it going, what? And oh, I can't tell you how many times I'm like that, to where I save a document and then I'm working with the teacher and I'm like, oh, I've done that before. Let me get that. And then when I go to get it out, I'm like, oh, I've got to tweak that before I hand that off to that other teacher, because it's like my memory of it and then the reality is like so different. And yeah, you do better when you know better. And it's just a job that you are never there. You're always, it's a journey. and it's neat to see the journey you've taken, and now how you're helping others through that journey is really exciting.
So thank you all for your time as well. I mean, I know you're in a class, but not everybody has to do this. So I really appreciate that you guys showed up, that you guys were interactive, your questions were good, and they were thought-provoking. I appreciate that immensely. I hope you all do have like the best of what's coming up.
Yes, thank you so much, Anthony. Give your little boy a kiss and say hello to your wife. It's good to see you.
All right. Thank you.
Okay,
Bye, y'all.
bye-bye.
Rock,
Yes,
I want to talk with you individually. Is that okay?
yes, yeah, you bet.
Okay.
If there's anybody else that was hoping to meet with me, then we can set up a time where you can come back on Zoom in a few minutes. Melissa, were you wanting to meet? Yes?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Okay, so how about log off for now, but why don't you come back on in like 5 minutes and then I'll let you in.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, great. Okay, and I'm gonna stop recording.